There is no guarantee for success, but there are ways to get closer to it when you do the right things. Who you surround yourself with is just as important as what you do. Finding the right people, the right classes, the right activities, and taking the right tests are all decisions that shape your future. Find out more today on Destination University with Dr. Cynthia Colon. Dr. Colon and her guests will give you the tips you need, whether you're a student, parent, or educator. Now, here is your host, Dr. Cynthia Colon.
You're listening to Destination University, a podcast for college-bound teens and the parents, mentors, and educators who support them. If that is you, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Welcome to episode number 76, Strategies to Beef Up Your Resume During a Pandemic. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Cynthia Colon, author of the book Tips, Tales, and Truths for Teens. Welcome to Destination University. By being here today, you help to grow the community of informed families across the nation. Thank you for joining the movement. Well, we're so excited to have Vince Garcia here with us today. He is the founder and CEO of Q&A College Admissions. Vince has been on the show before, so he definitely knows the drill. But we recently talked to students in Dream College Academy about what they can do to stay active, involved, and take on leadership roles, even during the pandemic, and what it really means to grow your resume and why we need teens to be strategic about that. What's all the fuss? It gave me the idea to really dive deeper, and Vince is the ultimate idea person when it comes to building your resume. He really has great tips and strategies, which we're going to get to, I promise you. So grab your beverage of choice and get your pen and paper if you're old school like me, because you're in for a treat. So hello and welcome back, Vince. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Cynthia. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember, but you originally aired for episode 11, which was back in November of 2018. And today you are officially kicking off season 4 with episode 76. So pretty cool. So thanks for being here.
Congratulations on getting so many episodes. That's great.
Well, like I said, I don't want to let our listeners wait too long to get all your goodness, because I know I only have you for so long. But if you can listen to episode 11, if you want to go back and get the whole story, because Vince's story and how he got to college and following his brother. I remember the story of following your brother and visiting colleges and stuff like that. That was really a great story. And tell the listeners at least the recap of where did you attend college, and list all of the colleges you've attended, you've worked at, the work that you've done in college admissions, because it's a pretty extraordinary list. So go ahead and share that.
Yeah, I've been really lucky in my career to have sort of stumbled upon in my first job, sort of full-time job, something that I love doing, and I didn't start out wanting to go into admissions, but what was interesting, having gone to Occidental and going to South Africa after I graduated from Occidental, somebody said, oh, or actually it was my dad, what are you going to do after you graduate? And I literally didn't know, because my major, I was a political science and religious studies minor, but I sort of explored the political spectrum, and I just didn't see it there. And having worked in elections, worked for the mayor, worked for a councilman, worked for somebody running for president, running for senator, all, cover the spectrum. But somebody said, oh, you'd be really good at admissions because you're good with people. So I thought, well, what is admissions? I don't even know what that is. I went to the admissions office. I had an informational meeting with one of the admissions officers, and that was a ton of fun. I realized you get to meet students, you get to go to high schools all over the country, and you get to then decide if they're a good match for Occidental, where I first worked. After 3 years, I thought it was important to get new experience, and I learned about selective college admissions by working at Pomona College. Pomona was one of the few schools at the time, and now is one of the few schools where the admit rate, their admit rate is well below 10%. But when I was there, it was between 20 and 30%, which we thought, how's it ever going to go lower? But it did, and it does. And then after that, working with senior interviewers, I had the opportunity at Pomona. I thought, wow, I'd really like to help students with the application process, so I could help them meet their life goals. Because when they're in college, things are set. They're already sort of moving places. And high school, there's still time to have an impact. So working on the high school side, I attended a lot of institutes that taught me about how to be a college counselor and how to help students apply. So I went to Rice, I went to Harvard, I went to Brown, I went to St. John's, I went to Sarah Lawrence. I remember Sarah Lawrence had us write the essay we would have written. That's a story that will curl your hair, and maybe one day you'll hear that one. But the process of applying, working at the school that I did, I worked with a large range of students, and there were athletes and actors and leaders and scientists, just a range. So I had to really adapt quickly. And then I've also done a lot of work in diversity spaces. So I've worked for the Point Foundation, which is the nation's largest LGBT scholarship. I helped undergraduates and graduates get their degrees, but also pay for them. So that was a tremendous job. I've done National Merit. I've worked with the National Hispanic Institute. I worked with College Summit, Matched Lighters program. If there's a program helping somebody get into college, I'm advocating for those students. So part of my probably 10 to 15% of my clients are pro bono, because I think it's so important to keep your finger on a wide spectrum. And so the other thing that I do to keep myself sort of in the know is I read applications. So I read fellowship applications for the Schwartzman Scholars, which is this amazing opportunity for graduate work in China. I've read for Ramba Reaching Out MBA for their scholarship program. And I have read for Berkeley and UCLA and San Diego.
Okay, listeners. So again, hopefully you have your pen and paper, because you're definitely in for a treat. And you can see why, even when I have private clients, or if I have a need for a second opinion or a question or just an idea, Vince is on the top of my speed dial. So there you go. All right, so let's jump right in to this topic of resume and strategically how to pivot during COVID, and how to strategically plan for this. So my first question is really, why is it important to strategically think about building a resume?
So I think the resume is sort of the foundation. It's a place that you can pivot from very quickly, because for an admissions officer, they look at your activities. Remember, on the common application, there's 10 slots. It allows them to see and imagine how you're going to add to the community. So colleges are looking for all types of students. They're not looking for just one type of student who's kind of checked off all the boxes. There are students who are like that, and that can be great. But they're also looking for students who are community builders. And community builders, that for me, what that means is that they're engaged in their school community, the larger LA community. They could be engaged in their family. And they have an impact in one or all of those areas. So your activities are the place where you're going to get the stories. So when you get to the point where you're writing your essays and you want to be saying something significant, that's the fodder. That's the place that you're going to start. And so it's important to be involved in those different areas so the college can determine what your impact will be within their college community. They definitely, I think this year more than not even, I think even more than the past before COVID, they're looking to see how students have pivoted. I think for juniors, almost going to be seniors, and sophomores, that will be the key question. How did this student pivot?
Absolutely. Okay, so you dropped a ton of golden nuggets and big bombs there. So I'm going to recap for the audience. Hopefully you took notes. I'm going to tell you where to take notes. First of all, Vince mentioned that there are only 10 spaces in the common application for a teenager to list their involvement. Okay, there are only 10 spaces. And the other piece that I often will remind families is all of your experiences and your decisions and what you're involved in now will come down to about 6 to 12 minutes of someone reading your application. That's it. So you want to be really able to fill those spaces. The other word that he used is community builders, and what that means and what that looks like. And attached to that, he also used the word impact. So in Dream College Academy, we often talk about the difference between being involved and being an impact leader. That's a big difference, especially if you're applying to highly competitive schools. You need to err on the side of impact. What kind of impact are you having in your community? And then the last thing that you probably want to write down is that sometimes we don't know why we're doing things and we're involved and we're doing activities, but just have trust and faith that it all comes down to you have to have something to talk about later, and you don't know what that activity might be. So something you might do now will lead to your best story later. So just trust the process. So, okay, now, so that's why we need to think strategically. But how does a 14 or 15-year-old teenager even figure out what they should be doing and how to go about doing that?
I think there's definitely time. I think for freshmen and sophomores, it's important to explore. So there's usually pockets where you need to gain special skills, or you have a talent already, or you're interested in particular areas. And you can explore at a really low level those interests. So the best way to do that is, I was talking to Cynthia before we got started, and I think the best form of free mentoring are podcasts. If you're interested in entrepreneurship or hip hop music, there's an amazing podcast on dance. There's expertise. You want to be a therapist, you're interested in psychology. I mean, I'm sort of shocked by, if you want to be a writer, there are podcasts about how to write. And you, every week or depending on when the podcast launches, you get that expertise. So there's a chance to explore. But once you've got your sort of podcast people or interests that you're interested in, you could also, there's a lot of, they're called MOOCs, which are massive open online courses where you can begin to take a class that's free in the particular area that you're interested in. So I always say podcast, MOOC, and then the cool thing is you could also sign up for LinkedIn. It's another revenue sort of strategy, but they have a lot of, they call them now LinkedIn Learning. And so a student could look up a particular subject like social media marketing, and there are all these classes or courses that they can take that are linked to LinkedIn. And then from LinkedIn, you can connect with people and begin to develop connections. I remember I had one student who attended a great sort of networking, this is how you get your boost your resume. And they said, you've got to look like what you want to do. And so he wanted to do engineering. So one of the assignments was to interview 5 people in the field. So he went to LinkedIn, they showed them how to send the email, and then questions to ask. They went through it with them. Well, he was so excited by the process, he ended up interviewing 25. One of them was so impressed by him that invited him to do research. And ultimately, all of this led to he won a full tuition scholarship at USC because he really looked like an engineer by the time he applied. But it all began from finding your passion, finding the areas that he was interested in, and then pursuing it in ways that are accessible and ultimately sort of looking like the area that you want to go into. If you're interested in pre-med, there's so many opportunities. I'm sure there's a podcast out there. I'm sure there's something on LinkedIn. There are definitely classes and summer courses that are pre-med courses. You can always make these linkages as you move forward.
Well, and I think that so. First of all, I'm a big advocate of read, watch, or listen. Every person, every teen, or every person learns a certain way in one way better than the other. So reading, watching, or listening. I'm a big listener, so I listen to podcasts. I love that suggestion you give. And MOOCs, that's something new for me. And then LinkedIn, that's great. But here's the thing I would say too, to add to your notes as you're taking notes, listeners. Again, your team, you might be thinking, but my team doesn't know what they want to do. They might have some interest, right? So you might just say like, oh, I like math and science, or oh, I like, writing. And then you sort of start there. I was on College Board not too long ago, and I was looking at journalism for a private client, but that was something I was interested in when I was a teenager. I just knew, I was like, oh, I want to be a news broadcaster. But had I gone down this road and kind of kept looking and clicking and finding more, I would have found sports journalism, which I didn't know existed, which is probably, had I known, I would have said, hey, sign me up for that. That's what I would have wanted to do. So sometimes you just have to follow the trail. Start wherever you are, meet yourself wherever you are, and just kind of keep looking. Now, the other thing I would say is self-initiative. So the student that you mentioned that ended up interviewing 25 people, that's self-initiative. And someone said, hey, I'm actually impressed by you, and then gave that student an opportunity. So you just never know when opportunity is going to arise. So that's really great. Wow.
Yeah. And what was interesting about that research opportunity is that professor asked a high school student to do research, even though he was at a university. He thought, wow, you're so interested in this subject matter, I think I can really help you. And it did. I mean, he's very successful Viterbi engineering student.
And who would say no to Viterbi? Right? Awesome. Yeah, I think there's so many stories like that, when I have stories of kids taking self-initiative and then one thing leads to another and boom, so. Okay, so I want to be able to give some solid practical examples of what to do in this pandemic, how to pivot. Maybe you have some stories that you want to share of examples of your own students, how they have pivoted. I have some too, but I want really this to be about you. So where would you like to begin? I can throw out some things that you can give ideas to, or would you like to start with a tale of your own? Let's start there, maybe.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I helped students to think about is I help them first sort of understand where they're going, and sort of set the table and explain to them, this is why we're doing this. It's not just to like give you activities to keep you busy, but it's actually to work on skills, develop interests, and to uncover or discover new passions. So we sort of talk about, where we're going, and then try to find the catch areas, and then move them in the direction. I help them think about ways that they can move in the direction. And I always tell students, you want to keep it as simple as possible. And again, the best way to do that is find somebody who's already an expert. Podcasts, there's so many. The MOOCs are great, online learning. And then the third thing is I always encourage people to keep it local. So I had one student who was really looking to do some volunteer work. And there's a lot of opportunities for tutoring. And people think tutoring can include a wide range of students. And I'll send you this link afterwards, Cynthia. There was a lot of students during the pandemic who created online tutoring opportunities for students in their local area. But one great idea was there was a student that I had who had been working with senior citizens at the local library, and he would have sort of like office hours, and he would help the senior citizens with technology because they didn't understand, what is Instagram? How do I get to Instagram? How do I post? How do I like something? I'm having dexterity issues with, moving my finger around. So I'm going to, get the seniors a stylus because they can, that moves you beyond the issue. So what he did during COVID, because we really struggled to find something like that because the senior citizens they had significant needs. So he started to call local retirement homes, and he luckily lived in an area where there were probably 40. So he developed a partnership, and he had so many partnerships with retirement homes, he ended up having to manage a group of students from his high school. And so they created this organization where they all have office hours. They're responsible for 2 or 3 retirement homes, and let's say every Friday or every Monday. But that was just genius. And and what was interesting was he realized he was also interested in business, and he realized that there was an opportunity because as America gets older, that we have to focus our time and start to think about what are we going to do with all of these older people. So it's really interested him in sociology and business. And the other thing that's interesting, and I always tell people this, colleges are really interested when students are putting themselves in diverse situations where not everything is comfortable. So that could be joining an organization that promotes internationalism or globalism, or working with senior citizens, or had a student who wasn't queer, not part of the LGBT community, but his best friend came out, then his sister came out, and he wanted to become an ally. So he asked his mom, is there something that I can do for you? And so he started to develop with the support of a transgender group at UCLA, social media that would help young people understand what it's like to transition and what are the medical issues that you need to think about. But by the end of that, over the space of 3 years, he became quite an ally. In fact, he probably knew more than his sister or his friend at this point about the larger community. And he could speak articulately about that. So think about what you like doing, what you want to do. Try to get an expert through podcasts, do some online learning. There's so many different ways to do that. And then keep it local and close.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat. This is what I wrote down. Step 1, figure out what you like doing and where you're going. What's the goal, right? But usually that's tied to what you like doing. Number 2, keep it simple. Number 3, keep it local. Mm-hmm. And I actually wrote down also be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's another little takeaway as well. So there.
I also wanted to share one more story that I think will help people think about become comfortable with being uncomfortable. There was a student, there's a lot of young men out there and some young women that love esports. Like that's their community. They're up there in Twitch and they're, watching this and that. And one of the young men that I was supporting really began to notice this space was not diverse. It was not diverse ethnically. It wasn't diverse gender-wise. So he partnered with this sports organization to provide resources and training, and then a tournament in Las Vegas to make the space more diverse. And when the I guess the weekend event launched, he ended up getting like over 100,000 people watching the tournament.
What?
But it took 2 years to get this thing moving. But what he accomplished was extraordinary, because here was somebody who was saying to colleges, you know, if I see that there's a lack of diversity of ideas, of in ethnicity or culture or gender, I'm going to address this. And it was, I think it was, we'll see. I mean, he's a senior, so we don't know what's happened yet. But my hope is that really is going to play out well. So
that's a great example of impact leadership. So people who have been following me for a while will know that I talk about the line for 5. When I was at Vassar, at the very top, there's blank space. If the student was the student body president, the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, the yearbook, Eagle Scout or Gold Award winner, team captain of a major sport, or curing cancer or whatever that 5th thing, wrote a book. I remember having an author, illustrator. So that impact. And I always say, do you know why those, why we made space for that? And, they're regarded well by their peers and adults. They, you can't just get up and say, I'm going to be the editor in chief. You have to have put in your dues. You just talked about someone who took 2 years to create impact. So that's impact leadership. I mean, the examples I gave are the traditional ways that you can have impact, but not everybody can be student body president. So by and large, most teenagers need to be thinking strategically as a freshman or sophomore, what am I going to do to create my coolness factor and my impact leadership? So that's a really great example. Now, can you give an example of like literally like a first step or second step what did he have to do to, how does one get 100,000 people to an event? That doesn't happen overnight, right? So step 1 was like, what?
The step 1 was really creating the partnership with that really diverse organization that was in South Central, and then building up leadership and committed leaders within that community so that there was a partnership. It wasn't just like this person came in and started giving stuff out and then they disappeared. It was over 2 years. He learned a lot from them because those are the people that he wanted to participate in in the competition, in the event. And he had to build allies in that group. So the first thing was to make sure that the organization that he partnered with could tell that he was committed to them for the long term. And he has been. I mean, they already sort of knew that because he had been involved with them since he was, in elementary school. But one other really good story is when I say keep it local, and this was actually a student at Marymount, but I remember, and it was, I'm not exactly sure how I missed this, but it wasn't until maybe the 6th month I was working with this particular student. But when we were doing the writing, it became apparent that they were the caretaker for a grandparent. And at night, they were responsible for watching them.
Wow.
And they didn't really think that was an activity. So I always go back to you because you have a really wide body of students that are taking care of other people, that they don't necessarily think that's an activity. That is an activity. Let me say that 10 times. That is a major activity. And for this student and for that particular grandparent who would sometimes like run out the door when her parents were asleep, it was, there was some sleepless nights because sometimes she'd get up often. So I think it's really important for individuals when they're trying to talk about what their lives are like. And this is really what the activity part is about. is make sure that you're really, when somebody asks you, what are you doing with your time? What are you doing after school? Make sure you're very, very complete in your description, because you may be doing something that you don't think is an activity, but in fact it is. I had a group of students that I was working with through Matchlighters. They were all at the same high school. They ended up, instead of creating a book club, they created a college club. So this year they helped one another apply to college. So one person was on the interviews, one person was on demonstrating interest. And I sort of led, I'd throw the topics out there and divvy out the responsibilities. But at the end of the day, those 8 people were able to help one another, because I couldn't spend 30 hours with each of them, but I could definitely, over 8 weeks, help them make sure that they got the information and they shared it with one another in meaningful ways. So there's lots of different ways to create impact.
Oh, I just love what you're saying here, because at the end of the day, they're given your resources. What did you do?
Mm-hmm.
And really, what did you do with outside of class time and class work? What are you doing with your time? And so often teenagers don't really believe that, like the student that you said, didn't really feel like what she was doing by helping and being a caretaker was list worthy, was worthy of one of those lines for 10. So I want to, with the time that we have left, I want to ask you, talk about sort of 2 things, and maybe they're sort of tied in the same category, but about this time last year, there were a number of things that shut down, and summer programs weren't available. And so a lot of students said, well, I was going to, go to this country or this summer program, and it was canceled. And so now what do I do? And people sort of didn't know how to pivot. So my question is really kind of 2 parts. So now that we're in 2021, what can people do for summer? And or how does one create a summer program for themselves? How do you pivot, in this pandemic?
Right. Well, that's interesting, because I think one thing that I found during the pandemic is that a lot of individuals and a lot of schools pivoted. So if you have a particular interest, I was just looking at there was a great summer programs virtual fair, I guess, that I just attended recently. And I was really interested in who was in the space. So one of the organizations in the space is Sotheby's. Sotheby's is an auction house, and they sell high-end jewelry and art, and it's really, they have an incredible litany of courses that they're offering virtually that teach people about art and law, or solving crime and law. Like, how do you know if that painting is real? How do you know that's not a forgery? You just paid, $10 million and you bought something that somebody painted, over in Italy, some little workshop. Anyway, so there are, whether you want to do something virtually or in person, I'm beginning to see in-person options coming back. And we're all familiar with which states tend to shut things down. LA, New York, San Francisco, they're shut down. So I don't, if my students want to apply to a program and be in person, we're not applying to those programs. We're going to Texas, we're going to Utah, we're going to Florida, because they just don't, close it down. So, but we also find virtual ones. Now, one thing that was really impressive to me about creating their own sort of virtual summer program, I had a student who had a requirement for school where the school traditionally, they would ask students to go abroad, and they would have a two-week experience in Costa Rica or Vietnam. And it was part of their global graduation requirement to be a global scholar. And the school still had that requirement, but the student had to find ways to fulfill that, to put themselves in a diverse situation, but it had to be virtual. So Language Bird was really good for that. And Language Bird, if you speak a language or want to learn to speak a language, they have free conversation groups, and you can also take a foreign language or enhance what you're already doing, or you can take the class through Language Bird. So we did that, and he organized a group of students from his high school who were interested in Spanish, and so they started doing that. But then they found online global awareness summer opportunities. Hobie was a great one because that was 4 days. Global Leadership Congress, and any student can apply as long as they find a sponsor. And the sponsor could be your mom or dad's business, or your uncle owns, a cookie business, or, you have a relative who's, selling corn on the corner over there. They don't really care what the business is. They just want you to go out there and ask a business to sponsor you. And it's as simple as an email. So the best way to pivot is to figure out, what is it that you want to learn? Where are your holes? There's no leadership, you don't have any activities. You have this passion, but you haven't demonstrated that you've taken it and created something from that passion. So I have a lot of students that have the opportunity and the privilege to attend some amazing, expensive summer programs, but it's not just attending these programs that makes a difference. It's what they create after having, and it could be a free MOOC, which is, again, if you take a class on web development and you set up, you program a website for senior citizens that helps them navigate the world, I guarantee you that Penn and Harvard are going to be more interested in you than somebody who attended, a $13,000 summer program. And ultimately, it didn't seem to translate into any noteworthy activity afterwards.
Okay. So I want a follow-up question on summers, because this episode, listeners, we are recording this episode. It's early March 2021. It will air a little bit later this month. But depending on when you're listening, can you share, just for our listeners to understand, when is the best time to be applying for summer programs?
Right now is the best time.
But they open up as early as fall of,
yes,
right?
yes. So you have a lot of programs open up in December, and they've been sort of rolling out their programs. You can still find some excellent programs out there, and sort of the gold standard in if you're interested in STEM is the opportunity to do research. And there's a lot of students who go to great high schools, but they don't provide any research opportunities. San Diego, USC, Polygence, Pioneer Academics, they all have programs where they take students through the process of doing scientific research. And one of my students ended up at USC last summer. They turned their Viterbi summer research program, they turned it virtual, like on a dime. And so he was doing the experiments in his kitchen. It was amazing to watch. But it all sort of paid off because, again, he wrote a great essay for Brown, that Brown could see that this, here's this kid doing science in the kitchen and speaking in what I would say is a humorous way. So there's always opportunities, but I would say that your best friend is definitely the internet.
I love all of this. Okay, so I wanted just to get that in the episode so that we can understand that applying to summer programs really, starts at the end of, like you said, in December and then goes all the way. And I've often shared, when someone says, "Oh, I missed the deadline. It's now April or May," I say, go find the program you wanted to do, look at the curriculum, and then create it yourself. Like there's a way that you can figure that out, or go to the community college, or take this course or that course, or experiment in your kitchen, whatever. But you can take the curriculum of any program you wanted. Let's say you can't afford to go to that program. There are definitely ways that you can be just a self-starter and just do it. So
Absolutely.
okay, awesome. So I think we're pretty close. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? Because I'm gonna recap some of the cool things that you've mentioned.
The one thing I would just say is, and you reminded me of it when you were just talking, that if you have a particular interest in a school, and if you can sort of find an area within a school, if it's very popular, like business, within business schools, accounting tends to be less applied to. And I had a student in San Gabriel Valley, and they're lucky because they have two amazing community colleges. They have Pasadena City College and Glendale City College, and they have accounting certificates. I said, if you applied to USC and you'd already completed 3 classes in accounting, they know you're real. And there's no, besides plumbing probably and fixing cars, everyone needs an accountant. You will always have a job if you if you do accounting. So always look at the community college, because here in California, you're only paying $13 a unit. That is a really affordable way to do it.
Hello. Can we talk about the cost of college? That's excellent. It's a really great point. So let me recap some of the things, because listeners, if you remember, I asked them to really talk about summer programs, and then the key, which might be why you're listening today, is the pivoting. And so I love this is why we're two peas in a pod. A lot of what you say, I say as well. So number one, what do you want to learn? What do you want to learn?
Yeah.
Number two, what are your gaps? What are your gaps? I write that down because when I do family consultation, I say, these are your strengths and these are the gaps. This is what you've said you wanted to do, and it's not so much. I don't see it. So you have a passion, but if there's no evidence, that's where that's a gap. That's what Vince is talking about. Right? If you have a passion, but there's no evidence on your resume, there's nothing that's saying, hey, this is what I do, that's a gap. So you want to find a way to start to develop that resume of evidence that shows that you look like what you say you want to do, which is something that he said earlier. You have to look like what you say you want to do. And then finally, it's not enough to just, this is a really big point. So I'm going to look you straight in the eye. If you're watching this, I'm looking you straight in the eye. This is a really big point. It's not enough just to go and do that program. It's called a summer program, or join a team, or watch a lesson, a MOOC, or LinkedIn or something. It's not enough to just do that and then say, oh, okay, I added it to my resume. That's what we would call step one. Like, that's involvement. That says, like, okay, you're adding to your resume. The impact is what counts more. So understand that once you have the information, the more important piece is that you apply it, that you do something with it, and you create something more, because given your resources, what did you do? Now that you have this knowledge, what are you doing to impact a community? So that's really what I would say, that hopefully you wrote those down. So, okay, lots of tips and lots of tales. I mean, if you didn't walk away with some solid examples of what to do and how to get started, or some motivation, I don't know what to tell you. There are lots of tales that lead us down the road. But here is the real truth that I take away today. And this is all about being strategic, and why is it important? And I'm going to leave you with this. The truth is, you have to look like what you want to do, what you say you want to do. And I'm going to repeat it as many times as for you to hear me when I say that, because most teenagers and most parents will say, but what if I don't know what I want? You have to keep putting the breadcrumbs and just follow the trail. You're right. You're not alone. Teenagers don't really know. They kind of know. And oh, by the way, nobody 3 years from now is going to say, you applied to be an aerospace engineer and now you're wanting to be a mechanical engineer. No one's going to come back and say that. Right. So just pick something that you kind of are interested in and just keep following those breadcrumbs. It will lead you to where your heart really is. Maybe before you apply to college, maybe after. We don't know. But don't beat yourself up. Give yourself some grace and some space to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And don't let the unknown be the obstacle from movement. You got to keep doing something. And that's what we mean by pivoting. So there's my truth for today.
That's great.
All right, hold tight. I'm gonna do my closing right now, and then I'll have you wave goodbye. All right, so thank you so much for being with us today. And gosh, don't you just love Vince? I mean, he is a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully he's been helpful for you today. So thank you for joining the conversation. We know you have a very full and busy life, and so thank you for spending time here on Destination University. To thank you, please go to my website, drcynthiacolon.com, and you have a choice of 3 free gifts. So choose the option that best serves your teen and where they are now. If this episode has in any way fueled your confidence or helped build your dreams, please share this episode with 3 people in the next 30 minutes. And if you're feeling extra loving, please hit subscribe and write us a review. My mother in advance will thank you because she loves listening and reading those reviews. And remember, you can join the Facebook group no matter what age your teenager is. Facebook group Destination University, just like the podcast, is open to all parents, and you can find others who are just like you going through this process. That's all I have for you today, my dreamers. I'm Cynthia Colon. Remember to share this episode with 3 people, and wherever you are, may you have a happy and sunny day, and we'll see you right here next week, same time, same place. Bye for now. Okay, wave.
Thank you so much for listening this week to Destination University.